Okay, so you've got your traditional holiday homes. So these are what we kind of maybe remember of old. You know, they've always been places, haven't they, where you can go with your family, go and stay by the seaside, and perhaps going to a hotel. Certainly, we never went to a hotel. That was always very expensive. But you could maybe hire, a holiday cottage or something like that. So that's very traditional. There are other areas that are all considered to be serviced accommodation, and that is assisted living. So that's a class C3B. Okay, so basically people receiving care. And also we've heard a lot about supported living, assisted living. This is a huge new kind of strategy where you basically have care providers who are really good at giving care but don't have much property experience, and you got property providers who are good at property but don't have much care experience, and they at the moment are starting to join together and doing some really, really fantastic stuff in that remit. So it's a really great one to understand. Then you've got things like short stay HMO. So certainly during COVID, that was a big shift of people converting their HMOs into short-term lets. Also on top of that, with the number of with the cost of utilities and things raising and becoming more expensive, quite a few HMO landlords are happy to run at, say, a 60% occupancy, because guess when they're empty? They're more likely to be empty in the winter, when normally it would cost them a ton load of money to heat the place. So they're quite happy to be quite empty over the winter, and then make a lot more money per month, per night, from running short-term lets. So that's a really interesting one as well. So that's C4, or obviously you've got sui generis HMO. You've got professional company let, so that's C3C. You've obviously got your Airbnb, so what we kind of understand the serviced accommodation. So you've got C1, so we've got a hotel, and that is C1. That is its actual use class. You've obviously got C3, so that's your normal dwelling place. So that is where you live. So I'm in an office in my house. It's actually a bedroom that we've painted. I've got my desk in here, but it makes a great office. So this is C3. This is your home, but it can also be your second home. So where you may go to, you might have a nice place wherever, and that is your second home, and that is also classed as C3. And then you can have sui generis, which is basically lumped into everything else. So again, we've already mentioned you've got your hotels, your guest houses in your B&B, and they are classed as C1. So again, we talked about hotel. When you think of a hotel or a guest house, that is C1 use class. I've already mentioned my hotel, but it is actually, we call it an apartment hotel because it is inherently lots of individual studio flats that make up the whole apartment. But ours is still C1, but you can have, full size apartments that all make up an apartment hotel. That can be classed as C1, but also each of those could individually be classed as C3, but it just runs as a hotel. So you can see here, there's a lot of different parameters going on to understand this. Then you've got your co-living. So that's HMO, and that's generally on bigger sizes. That's sui generis. And then this made me laugh. I didn't really think of this. So Jonathan McDermott, as you can see, his information is all at the bottom, and these are his slides that I've taken off the internet, off YouTube, and I'm going to put a link to it. And he is absolutely fantastic, by the way. Is secure serviced accommodation. So that's prisons or detention centres, and that's actually class C2A. And it's very true, isn't it? You are given, a bed, you're given services, you're fed, you're watered, you've got access to a gym, you've got this, that, and the other, and it's only short term. It's not your principal primary residence, but it may be longer term for some than others. So that's also included in there. You also have hostels, and then of course you've got kind of caravan parks, holiday parks, and things like that. So you can really see there's an awful lot going on here. So many different kind of explanations of serviced accommodation. And certainly for us in the kind of world of understanding serviced accommodation. Serviced accommodation, as you can see here, has always sort of inherently been, hotels, guest houses, and we would call C3 more your short-term rental property in just a normal house. But there's been so many descriptions thrown out there that it really does cause quite a lot of confusion, and most it's called sort of serviced accommodation. But I do still prefer short-term rental. And actually, I can see a couple of you on here who know and in fact are reading my manuscript. So I've got a book coming out, and it's a real decision whether to put serviced accommodation or short-term rental. But I'm a lot of us, and especially Boostly, Mark Simpson, I know Dave Goodfellow from Noki Stays, we all talk a lot more about short-term rental because it just makes the whole description much clearer, because obviously with serviced accommodation, you could be talking about a prison. So that's where I like to and prefer to talk about short-term rental. So what is happening? So already, if you are in Scotland, Northern Ireland, in Wales, there are already kind of things in place that are kind of, I don't know whether it's helping them, but they already have elements, and whether it's licensing or whether it's planning, that already is in place in those areas. But in the UK, in England, we don't really have that understanding. They don't really know what's going on. They are obviously overwhelmed with what is going on, and there is a lot going on. So it has kind of fallen to the local councils. And I know a lot of kind of trainers around this would always say, oh, you should go and ask your local council if you can run it as an Airbnb or something like that. And that would always, I just go, oh my gosh, don't do that, because you'd speak to somebody, and no disrespect, you'd speak to somebody and you'd say, oh, I'd like to run my C3 residential property, like a home, as serviced accommodation. And of course, serviced accommodation to them sounds like a hotel. It sounds like a bed and breakfast. It sounds like those things. So they would quite often say, oh yes, you need to make a change of use for that, or put in a pre-planning application. And inherently that just ticks the box in so many ways, because it means ka-ching, that's some money coming into the council. And then if they come through that, they might go, oh yes, and then actually yes, if you're running it as serviced accommodation, you do need it to be C1. Whereas actually there was, up until now, majority of C3, your own home, your own dwelling, was run perfectly fine for short-term rental. So kind of under that booking.com and things like that. And that has been absolutely fine. So it's been a lot of kind of confusion up until now, and it's been down to the local council, and inherently that poor person on the end of the phone just doesn't really know. And when you don't know, what do? You just advise them to go and make a pre-planning application, and you get a nice tick by your name because you've been bringing in some more money. So it's really key to understand that, everywhere has got kind of different thoughts. And then we've obviously got sort of London, which has the 90-day rule, and we'll go a bit more into that. And then you have got sort of other areas, Cornwall are bringing in various restrictions. So yeah, it's really important. And I think, one of the points that he's put there is there really isn't any compliance with regards to kind of health and safety. And one of the things, I don't know if you're aware, but there was the EPC debacle. So we had to have a really good EPC, and that's now been taken back. You don't have to anymore. But in serviced accommodation, it didn't matter what EPC you did, because it isn't somebody living there long term. It's somebody coming for maybe a week, and you yourself, as in the person running that business, is paying for the heating. So if you've got a really poor EPC and you're spending a lot of money on the heating, well, it doesn't really matter to the person staying there. Whereas it's very different if you've got a tenant who's on an ASD, an assured short hold tenancy, then they're going to be having to pay for the fact that your property is really poorly insulated, and therefore, I've had that before. I've stayed in a place and it was literally had oil, and it just, you could visibly just see it like going down like that, and it was like, oh, another refill. So, and it was always freezing, even with the hot heating blasting out. So it's really key to understand that with serviced accommodation, there's nothing there saying that you need all of these kind of health and safety measures that you have under with a tenant. I mean, obviously we know that tenants, gosh, you have to have so many things in place to ensure that you are compliant, to ensure that your tenant is safe. And then if you ever needed to take your property back, or your tenant was not behaving in a nice way, because there can be some problem tenants, can't they? Then you have to have done it all correctly. If you didn't, then basically the tenant can run amok, and you know, one small error can be a major issue. So either you want to make sure that you've got a really good letting agent looking after you, or you want to join something like the NRLA, the National Residential Landlord Association. They're really awesome. I'd highly recommend jumping into that. So that's already been set. You know, you have to be really compliant in ASTs, in tenants, in buy-to-lets. But with serviced accommodation, there's nothing. So you can understand that they are wanting to bring in these new measures to make it safe. And I, you know, absolutely, this is really good, don't we? We really want to make sure that people are safe. I mean, that is really, really key. You have to make sure, especially things like fire safety. And so many people don't understand how to run a safe serviced accommodation. So if you feel that you're running a serviced accommodation that, for instance, has cleaning products left under the sink, that is not the right thing to be doing. So if you feel that you're not educated enough, please get yourself educated. You know, there's so many people out there that can help. I even have a really cheap subscription, like £10 a month. You can join us for a couple of hours a month. I do mentoring. Lots of other people do. If you don't feel at this moment that you're running a professional ship, now is the time to get it, you know, done.